As a princess, you don't have to be the one locked in the tower waiting to be
Yeah.
saved. You could be the one jumping into the fight with armor and a sword. That doesn't make you any less of a princess.
Thank you for being here and doing this session. Super excited to have you.
Excited and happy to be here too.
That's awesome. So today I just wanted to have a conversation with a person of the LGBTQ community so that all of us who don't really have much understanding of who LGBTQ people are, what do they want, what are they doing, etc., right? Can get a little bit of insight from just one person to understand what this is about and who these people are and how they fit into our community and what is our role and how can we participate. And of course, as Defense Ninjas, the work I do is around empowerment and safety. I want to make sure that that is also the case, right? That everybody, no matter who we are, we all feel safe. We all have the right to feel safe, and we all have the right to feel empowered. So, keeping those goals in mind, I want to have that conversation for both, not just that this community feels that way, but also people who are watching this who don't understand the LGBT community also feel safe and empowered. Both sides of the people do. So that's the goal of this conversation. Anything you want to share before we get started?
No, not really. I think your your approach like really makes sense. I feel like safety and empowerment and for everyone is definitely not a zero sum game. Like it's something that can be achieved for everyone altogether. So yeah.
That's awesome. Excellent. So let's just start with who you are and just a little bit of background about yourself that you'd like to share.
Sure. My name is Sophia Lee. I am a transgender woman. I am Korean American and I am an immigrant. I am currently working as a software developer at Microsoft, and also uh, in my off time, I do a lot of work for transgender rights.
That's awesome. Excellent. So can you tell a little bit about what does it mean to be a transgender woman and how did that journey happen for you?
Sure. The term transgender is kind of an umbrella term. It encompasses anyone who doesn't identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. So for me, in my case, I was assigned male at birth, but that doesn't work for me, and it didn't feel right with my identity, and so that makes me transgender. And now I am living out as in the open as a transgender woman.
That's awesome. So how, if you want to speak a little bit about it, how did that journey kind of come about for you? Because a lot of people just get so confused, like, what does that even mean? And what does that, what does that mean that you don't feel like you're a woman or a man? What does that even, people don't get it. So
Yeah,
do you want to share a little bit of an insight on how that happened for you?
sure. So for the most part, uh, your gender is very much so a core part of who you are. And for most people, their gender matches what the gender that they have been assigned at birth, and they don't have to think twice about it. But for transgender people, we have that that misfiling essentially.
You
Um,
always just felt like you were a woman. You just felt it.
yeah, and
It was
like,
just
have you
natural.
ever felt like otherwise, not as a woman yourself?
No, I always felt as a woman. I was a tomboy growing up, and so I wondered every now and then, like, oh, I wonder if that's kind of similar because I wanted to wear button-down shirts and
Yeah.
kind of roll my sleeves up and not dress in dresses. I never felt that was right. So I wonder if that was kind of it's a similar way to think about it, or maybe not. I don't know.
It kind so what you're talking about is gender expression, which is different from gender. So regardless of regardless of how you identify as your gender, there are multiple different ways to express that. When you were growing up as a tomboy, that did not make you any less of a woman. There you could have been a pretty girl and loved dresses, or a cheerleader, or a nerd. Like all of those are different ways to express who you are, and none of that really cancels out the fact that you are a woman. And so, exactly the same as that for transgender people, there are multiple different ways of expressing our gender, and none of them are necessarily better or worse than any other one is. So, yeah.
That's really interesting because I always thought that I would never be able to understand what a trans person goes through ever. There's no basis for me to understand, right? Like, for example, if somebody is a dancer and they say, "Oh, dancing is really difficult because of this and that," as a martial artist or as a tennis player or whatever, I can see the similarities, right? And so in this case, I always thought, oh man, I guess I'm never going to understand. But it seems like that's not the case. I have my own avenues of understanding it. Oh, like, being a tomboy, not fitting in. And, my parents always, it'll be really funny if they watch this, they're probably going to laugh. They always thought I was a weird girl. Like, this is not how girls are. You're just not a normal girl, right? Girls don't speak like this. They don't dress like this. And so it's kind of like that, where I didn't fit into that definition that was provided by society. And it's really also interesting to me. I'm just reading a book right now called Dealing with Dragons, I believe is the book. It's a book about princesses, but they don't fit in their norm of princesses, And so they're like, oh, I hate this. I hate etiquette class. And I just want to learn magic and go fight. So I guess that those are similar avenues people can relate when they feel like, yeah, I don't feel like I fit into this norm that society's defining me with. I feel different as a different person. Why should I be and behave in this way or live a life in this way? So those are avenues we can all kind of relate to.
Yeah, and I feel like those are battles that we all face because, as I said before, there's no one way to be a woman. Like as a princess, you don't have to be the one locked in the tower waiting to be
Yeah.
saved. You could be the one jumping into the fight with armor and a sword, and that doesn't make you any less of a princess. It is time that we kind of it is far beyond time that we acknowledge that. And it's also a core part of feminism, I feel like, that you can be a woman and it is okay to express yourself in any of the multiple different ways of womanhood.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I'm just now starting to realize also that besides feminism and being a woman, I think other people can relate in many different ways too. Because I know a lot of converts and it's like people who change religions, right? If you listen to their story, and a lot of my friends are, so when you listen to their story, it's kind of similar thing. They always say, my whole life I never felt like I fit into this religion, and then it just didn't make sense, and this did not make sense, and I went on this long journey of exploration, and finally I found something that made sense for me. So it's kind of the same way of understanding that we are born into something, we put a label on, and it doesn't work for us, and then we find something that works for us. The same kind of thing for transgender people.
Yeah, and for transgender people, the way that we express it is we have always been the gender that we express. So for me, I have always been a woman. It's just that back then I was assigned a different gender, and and because of that, I was going through gender dysphoria because I didn't have I didn't have I didn't have the privilege of having my outside gender expression match who I felt I was.
I see. It's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. So, can you tell me a little bit about the challenges that you faced growing up, and then maybe even translate a little bit in general? Like, what is that? What are some of the challenges that translate to also the LGBT community in general? Lesbians, gays, other people, and transgender. The challenges that they face, and you faced also.
So when I was growing up, one of the main challenges for me was just not being able to see people like myself being represented in any sort of media. Transgender people were never shown on TV. It was never talked about. And internet was in its infancy and such. So there was very little space or places for me to go to kind of tap into the societal knowledge that's always growing in regards to these things, and that really made it difficult for me because I knew there was something different about me, and for the longest time, um, because I didn't fit in, I had this deep sense of shame. And yeah, and like later on in life, I was always thinking that it was too late, that I can't do so. My time has passed. I might as well try to be happy presenting as male. But in the end, it just catches up with you.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So, the idea of shame, I feel like a lot of minorities at least can relate to. I know I felt that the same way. When I moved from Dubai to the US, it was really tricky because I had just started wearing the hijab pretty
Mhm.
regularly, and my dad thought it was, usually it's that misconception people have. They think, oh, fathers force their daughters to wear a hijab. It wasn't like that. My
Mhm.
dad was a lawyer. He was a very logical man. And he said, you're moving to the US. Do you think you really should wear hijab full time? Right. And I was like, no, I want to do this. Well, okay. And I,
Mhm.
I really did struggle. It was just this, because it was very close to 9/11 at the time. So there was a lot of misunderstanding and misconception. And of course, right, in at least American media, you don't, at that time, there weren't Muslim women in politics. There weren't Muslim women in TV or any. Right now, at least you see some. So it was that sense of not belonging, feeling weird and odd, and the one left out, and this kind of there was a sense of shame, like, oh, I feel so embarrassed by how I am seen as a Muslim because of that one person or a few group of people have done. So there was a sense of shame for different reasons, but there was that sense of shame. And so, I remember having that conversation with my dad saying, oh, should I take off my hijab and maybe not wear it while I'm in college at least? And, so similar things of trying to just accept things the way they are. People don't wear hijab, so just accept that. And so interesting. I find it interesting that I can relate in very different ways, different story, but I can still relate to the sense of shame and sense of like not being represented, right? You can't find other people, so how are you going to find a sense of, okay, I belong here? So it's really interesting. So you feel like other people, even those who are not transgender, who are gay or lesbian, other people in the LGBTQ community have the same sense of shame and fear and just discomfort and not feel like they belong, and all those challenges are pretty much common across the community.
There is a lot of commonality among those feelings within the community, but there is a lot of key differences. Gay people and lesbians and bisexual people have been in the media for a decent long time at this point,
I agree.
and everybody knows at this point, like someone who is gay or lesbian. It is very common to have family members or friends who are gay, and there is a certain amount of understanding that has been slowly been building up within society about
Mm-hmm.
gay people and lesbians and bisexual people. But
Mm.
for transgender people, that has not been the case until very recently, when spotlight has kind of like shined upon us. So yeah, but also our sexualities generally is something that gets developed sometime around when we hit puberty, and that's when we discover who we are as like our sexual identities are. But gender identity is something that is far more core to who you are. And what I like to say is, by the time that our gay and lesbian counterparts are starting to discover who they are, us transgender people, we have been living in the closet for over a decade.
Yeah. So as the LGBTQ movement gains momentum, people starting to understand homosexual, right? Like gays and lesbians, but then not transgender as much. And I can relate to that too. I know if I talk to certain family members, they're like, oh yeah, I know what gay means. I know what lesbian means. Transgender, there's confusion around that, especially in the Indian culture, because there's a type of people. We were actually just discussing that, what the actual terminology is. If it was Enoch or what it was called in English. I don't still know that, but there's a person that's born both male and female at birth. And in India, they're very revered. They're very holy in the Hindu community, holy people. They come and bless your newborn baby. They bless a newly married couple. At the same time, if you're gay, lesbian, or transgender, they are murdered. There's lynchings, right? So it's really weird, especially coming from an Indian culture, because here you have a kind of a similar group that's really holy and revered, and then not that much changes, right, from at least people's understanding, and then they're like, no, this is really bad. So I guess I can see how transgender people, it's like really hard for people to understand. Oh yeah, they're Enochs or whatever. I don't know what's called in English. I know in Hindi it's called chakkas. So yeah, I can see that, how that's confusing, and then for people, and that they don't quite understand transgender people as much as gays or lesbians. So
Yeah.
what are one of the so what are some of the important things that you or the LGBTQ community really needs and wants to thrive in the society as any other
Yeah.
human being?
I mean, the most important thing is for us to be able to live.
Yeah.
To
What does
be
that mean? What do you mean by be able to live?
Well, there is a lot of violence that happens against the LGBTQ community still in this day, especially against transgender women of color and specifically Black transgender women who have
Oh, that's layering up.
not only transgender women, but also gays and lesbians who live in more rural areas where people would tend to be more conservative and will have less exposure to the community, and thus there is a lot of misunderstanding.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's just the world we live in where there's so much hatred in general, right? The Lives Matter movement took up in the last year. So there's a lot of that hatred in that area, and then there's hatred towards LGBTQ community, and then there's hatred towards whatever, right? Race. There's always something around the world. Muslims are facing genocide, etc. Myanmar, other places. So it's just the world we live in. It's just a difficult thing for some people, I think, to understand. But it's a challenge we all face, right? We all have that. I think almost everybody to some extent can relate to being a part, a minority of sorts in some way or another. I think most of us can. I really do think that one way or another, we feel like we don't belong, even if you're just a quote unquote normal white person who grew up in Texas, right? I feel like there's something about you that's different. You feel like, oh, I don't belong, right?
Yeah, no, there is all. I feel like all of us have some sort of identity that doesn't really mesh with what is commonly thought to be normal or common or regular or whatever. The word I really like is common because I feel like there's no normal or abnormal in cases like this. It's just what is common or not. But I feel like everybody has some sort of identity within themselves that they don't identify with what is what we see as common.
Yeah. So when you say, kind of going back to, the desire is to live, and I really want to pick on that a little bit. It's just that you feel the LGBTQ community has a really hard time thriving in a job, just living safely. Like, what does that mean? Can you just elaborate a little bit, right? It's really hard to do grocery shop or whatever, like coming down to the basics, giving examples so that we can understand a little bit more what that means.
Yeah. So a lot of children who are homeless, a very large percentage of them identify as LGBTQ. Reason for that is because when they come out, they get kicked out of their homes. And while that seems like something that used to happen a long time ago, but it's still something that happens today in this day and age often.
And there was a point in time when you didn't tell people, right? And then you told your parents. I'm assuming were the first people Was that really hard? Did you have fears around that?
Oh yeah, I had a ton of fears because um, there is always that chance of being rejected by family, and that is a very real chance for a lot of us when we do come out. I know so many of my friends who have come out to their family and they have been cut off or kicked out of their homes or rejected, and even young teenagers have had to figure out a way to survive on their own because they have been cut off from their families.
Yeah, this is gonna sound really strange, but I can actually relate to that too. And I hope that's not offensive that I'm saying that. I always knew, oh man, this is embarrassing because it's gonna go on YouTube and people are gonna like know all my deep dark secrets now. So I just didn't, when I was kind of in the phase of courting, dating, whatever, like getting married, that phase, right? I just never gelled with Indian men. Okay, so people from my culture, it just didn't work, and they were just whatever. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details of that. And I remember, but no, I married a white guy. So I remember when that first happened, I said, "Oh man, this is gonna be rough. How am I going to take a white guy to my parents?" Like, and that is real. I'm going to be disowned. That is real. So I definitely had fears. It's just weird for me, and strange that I can relate to some of those things you're saying about being disowned and just kind of coming out and saying, maybe I shouldn't have used that word, telling somebody in my family that, you know what, I really want to marry a white guy and not an Indian guy. I remember going to my brother first and saying, so this, I want you to know, because I can't go to my parents and say this. I'm telling you first. And he's like, okay, well, I had a conversation, and then sometime later, eventually talked to my parents, and it was a process for me. I think it's incredible that we can, even though we see, a person like me can say, I don't know what that means to be a transgender or gay or whatever. It's weird. I can't relate to it. It's funny, through this conversation, I could literally almost relate to everything in different sense, but we can still relate and understand at least those deep down struggles and challenges, even if they're for different causes or reasons. So
Yeah, no, that's totally real. And I came out as an adult, and that process was absolutely terrifying for me. And like it terrified me to a point where I just couldn't act for so many months. And that is after I am an adult and I am fully self-sufficient. I like make my own money. I like live by myself. Like I am completely independent, and yet the idea,
psychologically, you couldn't function
yeah,
because
it's
of
just
the
so the idea of losing family was that's scary. So it very much so mirrors what you said. Also, yeah.
oh, that's crazy. So, what are one or two things, if you have to say, that you've experienced someone tell you, or somebody has told you, or maybe another LGBTQ friend, like comments that people, either questions that they ask or some disrespectful comments, something that's really common, and I ask this because I know I don't know what that answer is. So I don't know how to phrase the question, but I know for Muslims, at least, right, speaking from my perspective, the one biggest issue we face as hijabis was always told, why do you dress like this? Take off your hijab.
Mhm.
It's just one big thing. It's like, well, you can wear a cross, so why can't I put a scarf on my head, right? So anyway, but that was one big thing, and I've also had people tug on my hijab, and so for us, that's a big thing that we want people to say, okay, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just a scarf on my head, right? If I didn't wear it, well, and you would accept me. So if I wear it, why wouldn't you accept me, kind of thing, right? So I want to
Yeah.
pose that question: like, what is that one thing, if you had to pick one thing that people just don't understand and always ask or rudely comment on, or.
Oftentimes, when I meet new people, the first or very close to the first question I get asked is if I had any surgery, which is a very private thing. It is.
Yeah.
It is usually not polite dinner table conversation to ask about one another's genitals. Really.
Yeah, that's strange that people ask that first. And do you think these are people who are, in the category who are genuinely trying to be friendly and understand, or they're in the category who think, oh man, this is absolutely not okay, what
No,
you're doing or who you are?
I think the thing is, people think that being transgender is very much so centered around our private parts, which it really isn't. It's more about who we
Interesting.
are as a person. And sure, our private parts are one aspect of that, but as I said, it's only one aspect of that. And a lot of times people just think that that is the center part of who we are. So they think that if I identify myself as transgender, that opens a door for them um, to continue the conversation to the logical point, which is asking about my privates. But that
Uh,
that's how they
yeah.
feel. Like it's kind of similar to like maybe a decade or two ago when you meet a gay person, a lot of times the question is something like, well, so who is the man in the relationship and who is the woman in the relationship? Or
Oh,
have sex
interesting.
or something like that, because like
Interesting.
that is the defining thing in people's heads of what it means to be a homosexual. So therefore,
Interesting.
once you identify yourself as a homosexual, it automatically opens the door for them to go to the next logical step in the conversation, which is asking about how you have sex.
Okay, yeah. So, not to ask these kind of questions, right? Don't ask inappropriate questions. Nothing private about relationships. No, no, don't ask those kinds of questions. So now we know what questions to not ask. What questions should people ask?
Well, get to know us as people first, because being transgender is only one small part of my identity. And when you meet someone and they just concentrate on one part of your identity, it makes you feel like they're not seeing you as a person. So, for instance, if I walked up to you and every single question I asked about you was being Muslim and your hijab and
Right.
the fact that you don't drink alcohol and stuff, is like it would then show to you that all I am seeing about you is the fact that you are a Muslim. But um, we as people have so many more, um, have so much more than that to who we are. So yeah, it's okay to ask one or two questions here or there, but it's more important to get to know people as people
Yeah.
first.
I think that's really important that you said that because it's funny that I get caught up in that too. If I meet someone, I remember I was at Mox playing board games or whatever, and then one of the servers, okay, I'm not sure if you went by she or they, had a little pin that said, I don't know what it said something that sparked a conversation. So I asked her about it, something about being bisexual. I don't know what it was, but I remember being in that curious. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, so what does that mean? So what does that mean? And I guess there's a balance because I'm curious, I want to understand because I don't understand, but at the same time, there's also, I know I would be really irritated after a while. I don't mind, right? If people ask, oh, what does it mean to be a Muslim? Why do you wear a hijab? Okay, yeah, that's one or two things, right? To understand who I am, where I come from, makes sense. Then after that, it's like, can we just be friends? Let's just be friends, like anybody else, right? Like imagine if I was whoever, right? Let's say you're a white person and you've only known. I'm just stereotyping. Let's just say you're a white Christian, okay? So and that's all you know. You grew up in I don't know Alabama or something, and you really haven't met anybody. But oh wow, this is bad. But okay, that's okay. I think we all are to some extent. There's a really interesting. Okay, I'm gonna digress. A really interesting article I read, and I can't remember who wrote that, but they said it was by I think a psychologist, and they said that everybody's racist. And she used that term just as a generic term. We all have biases, basically. And if you
Yeah.
think that you don't have a bias, that's scary. If you're like, no, I'm a good person. I don't judge people. Oh, you're a problematic person. As far as everybody recognizes that they all have biases, we can do something about it. So, anyway, so this is okay, I guess. But let's say if this person who knows nothing about being brown or being Indian or being Muslim or any of that, ask those questions, I think I would be okay. But then after that, I'm like, let's just be friends. Let's hang out. You like board games. I like board games. Let's play board games. Let's just, be friends. And then through conversations over time, you learn things like, oh, that's interesting, and that's interesting, oh, that's different, that's similar, and just you just get to be friends. Because I think ultimately we as humans on this planet just want to have a big community where we all have understanding, we all feel empowered to be ourselves, do good, be good people, do good work, and at the
Mhm.
same time feel safe and be safe no matter what we believe in or who we are or how we identify. That's really interesting. And also like the fact that you brought up alcohol, it's I have this list. this is this is gonna be interesting for people to listen to. Like, oh, Fauzi, I didn't know these things about you. Okay, but I actually did have a list of people I wanted to be friends with. Just because when I came to the U.S., I thought my life was very homogenous of sorts, right? I went to an Indian school. I literally all my friends were just Indian girls. Like, when I say Indian, I don't mean natives, right? I mean from India, the country India, right? So I really didn't have a variety of in people. We all kind of thought the same thing, growing up in Dubai. It was very, very similar belief system. So when I came to the US, I thought, this is cool. This is my opportunity to get to know white people and get to know Black people and get to know other Asians. Like, I knew some Filipinos, but I didn't know Japanese and Koreans. And so I literally made a list, and I said, okay, I think Japan's kind of cool. So maybe Japanese friend would be nice. Like, Korea's kind of cool. I got into like some Korean shows and stuff. And, so like, oh, that would be cool to meet an actual real Korean person. And I was like, oh yeah, this whole thing about Indians versus Chinese. Like, apparently Indians and Chinese, not apparently, I've experienced in the market. Indians and Chinese always end up in a fighting, yelling match. I was like, okay, so it'll be cool to have a Chinese friend, whatever. Made a list. Oh, white friend, a white Christian friend, Black. I literally had a list, and so I wanted to make sure that in the next few years, I actually had a friend. And I'll admit, I never put LGBTQ on that list because it just never occurred to me. It was not I don't know. Back in those days, which is 15 something plus years ago, it just wasn't a thing on top of mind. So anyway, I had that list, and I remember many years ago going kind of through like, ooh, I've actually gone through now, and now I actually know more people. I have a better understanding. And yeah, and at some point I did have Jewish person on the list as well. And then I had a coworker who was, and I was like, oh yeah, let's get to know each other. So anyway, because there is that issue, like, oh, Muslims and Jewish people don't get along. And I was like, well, let's see. So anyway, now that I have this diverse set of friends, right? I have Asians and people who are Muslims and who are not Muslims, and different race, different religions. We're so different, and I don't think much about it, right? Because it's like, oh, like alcohol. I'll just pick that as an example, right? It's just easy. So I don't drink. That's part of my religion, and I follow that pretty religiously. So I don't drink. And yeah, some of my friends do. So it's not a big issue. It's not a big deal. It's like, okay, you drink. Well, I'm just not, if you have something at a bar, don't invite me. I'm not going to come. Even if I don't drink, I just don't go to bars. So don't invite me, right? So that's pretty common understanding. And if I invite you over to my place, it's the same kind of thing, right? I just don't bring alcohol. You can bring other drinks if you want, just don't bring alcohol. Of course, if you invite me to your place and you have alcohol, that's your space. That's totally fine. I respect that, right? So it's kind of obvious. It's not a big deal. And in some sense, it translates not just to having different friends of different religions, which is like, oh, no big deal. Friends of different cultures, which is also no big deal, but also friends of different gender identity, which also along the same lines are like, oh, no big deal. I don't believe, let's say, if for religious reasons or whatever, right, or for cultural reasons, and I say, you know what, I think this is weird. I don't really believe that this is the right path to take as an LGBTQ person. My religion doesn't say that. And okay, yeah, but guess what? We can still be great friends. Just like I don't believe that I should drink alcohol. I don't believe in that. I think that's not okay. At the same time, I'm friends with everybody who drink or don't drink. The same kind of thing. And now a person who identifies a different gender, well, my religious beliefs or whatever don't say that. Doesn't mean I get to hate this person or say mean, rude things. Because if you are truly a religious person, every religion teaches compassion, right? So it's about being compassionate to everybody, regardless of who this person is. And if it's easy for us, again, I'm just taking my example. If it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, these people drink, no big deal, then it should be easy enough, or this person is Black, no big deal. It should be easy enough for me to say, oh yeah, my friend, she's bisexual. Or, my friend Sophia, she's transgender. It shouldn't be like, oh my God, I can't tell people. It's just like a person with some different beliefs and a different person than you are. And it's not a big deal. Right? It's just, oh yeah, we're different in different ways. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like the important thing is to kind of like build a world where we could all coexist together and have different views and different ideals and such, and be able to still live as who we are.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that you said that, and I really want to wrap this up with a very important question. I really want to ask that. So a lot of us watching this, right? We are either Christians or Muslims, or for whatever reason, this is a very difficult conversation. We can't, say this or do this or participate or support the LGBTQ community. Regardless of who we are watching this, I think at least everybody can agree that we believe that every human being has the right to be safe. Every human being has the right to have a job, have a good, decent life. So it's about eliminating hate, period. So given that, what is one thing that you think anybody, regardless of their religious beliefs or cultural beliefs, can do to participate in this conversation? I kept that question super vague for a purpose. I don't want people to feel like, oh, I need to compromise my religion to support this community. It doesn't have to be like that, right? Is there something someone can do that doesn't compromise their belief system and still be a good human? In fact, even participate as a religious person because you're religious as be a good person, and et cetera, right? So what is one thing people like us, anybody can do?
I think the most important thing is that we see each other as people first. If we start seeing each other as parts of these groups or parts of like these identities that we don't identify with, it's kind of like takes the people out of it. If we identify each other as people first with wants and needs and love, like hobbies, family and stuff, I think
Yeah.
it will go a long way to being able to understand other aspects of each other that is
Yeah.
that is not necessarily something that may be some sort of differences between you two, but to know that there's so much in common that you have with each other is very key to seeing each other as
Yeah. And if there is an action someone could take, even if it's small, something that they can get out and do, or maybe say, or whatever that is, there something specific you just say, hey, everybody, I challenge you to do this or something that would just make this world a much better place for LGBTQ people and otherwise. But I want to make sure you get your chance first, and then I'll say,
have more exposure to different types of people, because there are so many different types of cultures. There's so many different types of people in the world. The way that you live your life is completely valid, and there are so many other people out there who live their lives very differently, and that is also completely valid. And it helps to understand and to see the richness of the world that we live in when you see more and more of what else is out there.
that's also really interesting because I can relate to it again, in our Quran and Hadith, which says, in our scriptures, which in Muslim Islamic scriptures, which says God made people into communities, into different, unique communities, so that we may understand each other. So that's literally your job as a person, to understand different people. So that's really interesting. I can relate to that too. So here's something I really want to tell people, because I understand a lot of us come from whatever, like Christian backgrounds, Muslim backgrounds, etc., and we have this challenge like, oh, but my religion says LGBTQ is bad and it's a sin and whatever, and whatever. I think if we leave that aside just for a second and say, okay, I think there's a Christian saying, isn't there, which is hate the sin, love the sinner, something like that,
Something like
right?
that, I
Something
think.
like that. Something like
Yeah.
that. The point to it is, don't worry about whether you believe what other person is doing is right or wrong. That's not the conversation. The conversation is we're all people, and how can we make this a safe place for everybody, regardless of who they are. Be loving, be kind, be a good neighbor, right? All of those are Christian, Islamic, Abrahamic faith beliefs, and even if you're not one of these belief systems, and there's reservations in our hearts, I understand that, right? I understand because I have that same religious system that there's really conflict. Oh, the LGBT community, it's a big deal kind of just thinking of it as not a big deal. And there's one action I just want to challenge everybody to take, because I know it's hard. I know, because I come from a faith that some people believe LGBTQ being one of the, being gay or lesbian or transgender is a sin, and some people who are Muslims in Islam believe that it's not a sin. It's a big battle, it's a big debate, whatever, right? So I understand, I come from it. Even then, it's hard. Even then, just make a friend, right? If you know a coworker, if you know somebody in a community, like I go to a community that's a spiritual community with a whole bunch of people. If you just go to anything, you go dancing, you have a community of people there. Wherever you have a community, somebody, just kind of be friends with them. That's the only action I want people to take, right? Just be friends. Find somebody who is an LGBTQ person and be friends with them. And if you don't have, and I think I really do love what Sophia said, which is that if you don't have, or if you just don't have access to any LGBTQ people in your work life, whatever, your personal life or work, then find anybody who's different, right? Somebody who's different, just someone who's different than you are, and you feel a little, this is uncomfortable. It could be something simple as, I'm a white person and I'm uncomfortable around Black people. It's okay to have that bias. It really is. It's okay. I had that bias, right? Growing up in Dubai, that's all you hear. Oh, Jewish people are bad people. Or Israelis are bad people. They're trying to kill Muslims. And it was really funny. And I had this conversation with another person who was Israeli, Jewish in Israel. And the whole thing she heard her whole life was Muslims hate you and Arabs hate you and they're out there to kill you. It was so funny. It's like, oh, wow, we both heard the exact same thing, right? So it's we just need to step out of our comfort zone just a little bit. So whatever that is, step out of your comfort zone just a little bit. Go talk to that Black person. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I know you're white. You think Black people are weird or maybe they're gay. Whatever it is, it's fine. It's okay. Don't judge yourself and just step out of your comfort zone. Talk to a person who's different than you in whatever way. And that's where our journey begins. And that's how I've been on this journey for years. It didn't happen overnight. I can tell you this for a fact. 10 years ago, I would have been very uncomfortable. 10, 15 years ago, I would have been very uncomfortable having this conversation. I'm like, oh, she's transgender. This is so awkward. I don't really want to talk to her. So yeah, it's true. It's real. And I'm here today only because slowly over time, I've met different people. I heard their stories. We all come from a set of beliefs, and it's just step out of your comfort zone just a little bit. That one step, that's important. As a human being, we all need to do that. So make a friend. That's a challenge. I want everybody, make a friend a little bit outside your comfort zone. Anything you want to add, Sophia?
No, I think that's good.
Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from it today? I would love to hear your thoughts, so come chat with me in the comment section below. Are you looking to take your safety and empowerment to the next level? If so, I invite you to watch our free masterclass on street violence, relationship threats, and aggressive coworker behavior. Links in the description.